Hey there, Fletcher from All Things Overlanding here, and today I'm doing a follow-up to last week's episode where I'm talking about 5 modifications that I wouldn't do to my overlanding rig after having been doing this for about 5 years. If you haven't seen last week's episode, definitely go check that out, whether you're on the podcast or on YouTube, because I went through my 5 things that I would definitely do to every vehicle that I have going forward. So again, I've been doing this for a few years. I'm by no means an expert, but I've learned a lot of things, and hopefully it's helpful for you guys. So again, today we're going to talk about the 5 modifications that I would never make to my overlanding rig ever again. So if you want to learn more about that, stay tuned.
Understand where it came from, but you got it, my got it. It began in the land of the sandstorm. I fought it, though I wanted everything to do with what you give to me.
All right, guys, so as I mentioned in the intro today, I'm talking about 5 modifications that I would not do to my overlanding rig again after doing this for 5 years. So let's start with the first one. The first one is expensive rooftop tents. Now, to be fair, I've never done an expensive rooftop tent. The most expensive rooftop tent I've ever had is about $2,800. It's my current one, and that's at the top of my window. Now, there are a lot more expensive rooftop tents out there. There are $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 plus rooftop tents out there. I would never do any of those, and here's why. So I had the Nature Nest rooftop tent, and I will put a link in the description down below to that thing. For about $1,500 to $1,600 shipped to your door, you can have a clamshell-style aluminum rooftop tent that is amazing quality. I spent 60 plus nights in that thing, and it was fantastic, and it cost less than $1,600. There are very comparable ones from the big name brands that are twice as much money. I'm currently running an open road rooftop tent on my truck. That one's at about the top of the scale for me at about $2,800, but they have a very similar model to that tent for under $2,000, and that's the one that I would probably recommend for everyone, just because for the money you just can't beat the quality that comes with those open road tents. Now again, in most of these cases, I think most of these tents are built in the same factories overseas. So what I'm saying is, instead of spending twice as much money on the big name brand tent for literally the same quality in the same tent, some of these cheaper ones work just as well. And if you want to get out quite a bit, then why spend tons and tons of money when you could spend half the money and then spend the rest on other modifications for your vehicle and or gas, food, and just getting out more on trips. So again, I have had a lot of good experiences with less expensive rooftop tents, and I feel like too many people get sucked into the I need to buy name brand rooftop tent because I heard on Amazon or I heard on YouTube or I heard on Facebook that that's the way to go. Again, there's nothing wrong with those tents. They are fantastic quality. Generally, they'll have better warranties and stuff, so you are taking a little bit of a risk when you buy a less expensive tent. But again, in my experience, I've had 4 rooftop tents in the last 5 years, and most of them have been $1,500 or less. And those things have been fantastic. They've been great. I haven't needed any support. I haven't needed any sort of warranty or anything like that. And they've been really great. And I've had a ton of fun and spent a ton of nights in them without having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. A rooftop tent is one of those things that is very important, right? I'm not trying to downplay the importance of a quality rooftop tent, but I am saying that there are some quality rooftop tents that don't cost an arm and a leg. They can get you in the door, get you out there exploring, and you can have a really good time without having to worry about things like leaks or just the simple things, right? It is an enclosed space where you can sleep that is very easy to access and you can keep on your vehicle, that you can get out more and explore more without having to pack up a tent or take up a ton of room inside your vehicle. Okay, so the next modification that I would not really make on my vehicle again is super cheap lighting. Now, I've had a number of auxiliary lights. I've had a number of replacement bulbs and things like that. When it comes to headlights, if you have an older vehicle like a Cherokee XJ or an old second-gen Nissan Frontier, their headlights are really bad. Now, spending $40 to $60 on a set of LED bulbs for those is not the end of the world. It doesn't cost a ton of money, and they often do make a big upgrade. Now, you do have to worry a little bit about pattern and spread. Sometimes you're going to be blinding traffic, and that is a little bit annoying. You don't want to be that guy or girl. But for the most part, those upgrades are worth it. What I'm talking about, though, is like ditch lights, auxiliary lights, spotlights, fog lights, that kind of thing. When you're talking about dedicated entire whole unit lights, like ditch lights, there are a ton of really inexpensive no-name brands on Amazon, right? You're going to find names that are just absolutely insane that you've never seen before, and the brand is going to go away in 6 weeks. And then it's going to be gone. You're going to have no support. If the thing doesn't work or it gets filled with condensation or water, you're just out all that money. Even though it didn't cost much, you're still going to have a bad light with no sort of support. There are also really expensive lights, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend spending a ton of money on those big name brands either. There are, though, now a number of middle of the road sort of lights like Novsight, like Co-Light. Those brands have really phenomenal performance. They have great light output. They have good condensation avoidance on them. They're sealed well. They're great lights for the money, where they're in the middle. They're not as expensive as like your Diode Dynamics or your, rigid lights. They're not as cheap as like your just absolutely no-name Chinese brands. Auxbeam is another one that's a good middle-of-the-road brand that I've had some good experiences with. But so we all want auxiliary lighting, but we don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dollars on that auxiliary lighting. But also don't spend $40 on a set of ditch lights, because those things are not going to perform. They're not going to be good. They're not going to put out a bunch of light, and they're not going to last very long. They're going to fill with condensation and water, and they're going to foul out or burn out before you know it. So again, Novsight, Co-Light, Auxbeam, those are some good middle-of-the-road brands that are still very reasonable on price, but also really good quality. Okay, so the next modification that I will never do again is super cheap suspension. So when I first had my Xterra, I went with the Rough Country spacer lift. It was about $150. It came with an aluminum puck spacer for the front. You basically disassembled your coilovers, put this thing on the top, reattached your bolts for your top hat, and then put it on your truck. And then in the rear, it was just literally a shackle lift. So you basically took your stock shackle off and added an extended shackle. It put more stress on my rear leafs, though. It flattened the leafs quicker, and I ended up having to replace my whole rear leaf pack sooner because of the Rough Country lift. Now, does it get the job done? Yes. And I am still going to say, I wouldn't ever say 1,000% never do it, but I did spend $150 on it. I ran it for a year or two. It wasn't great. It rode like crap. I got coil bucket contact up front where my upper control arm was contacting the top of the coil bucket mount in the truck. And it just didn't ride good. You could tell that the suspension was not set up for that, and now you've just spaced it out and sort of forced it to be taller without actually correcting for the geometry and stuff that you should when adjusting your suspension like that. Now, I'm also not advocating for going out and buying Fox shocks and like top of the line spending $3,000 to $5,000 on a suspension setup either. If you're going to be doing a bunch of desert running, off-roading, rock crawling, that sort of thing, and you're a big wheeler, then yes, spend the money on the suspension. But for overlanding, you don't really need that much stuff. I went with, personally, on my 3rd gen Nissan Frontier, the All Dogs Off-Road RC Killa Kit. My truck was brand new when I bought it. My shocks were brand new. I just didn't see the point in replacing the entire system when it was literally brand new. But for less than $500, I got adjustable cam bolts, a replacement spring for the front. So I disassembled the entire front coilover, replaced it with a bigger spring that gave it lift in the front, and then it was an add-a-leaf in the rear. So again, not a longer shackle, not putting additional strain on the rear suspension, but instead strengthening the rear suspension and lifting it up so that it gave me the lift that I needed to get a little bit taller to fit these 33-inch tires. So again, if you do it right, if you can spend not a ton of money, but you also don't want to just buy the cheapest literal spacer lift that you can find. So that's kind of what I'm advocating for here. Now, eventually, 30, 40, 50,000 miles down the road, when this truck starts to wear out and the suspension starts to go flat, I will replace the entire rear leaf pack, probably with a parabolic kit from All Dogs Off-Road. When my shocks start to go, they've got some really good Coney shocks. They both increase the quality and comfort of the ride, but also adjust for that taller lifted truck. So I will probably go to the Coney shocks. It's kind of my thought when I go, when my shocks wear out on this truck. But again, don't go with the cheapest thing. Don't just buy the cheapest spacer lift that you can, because it's going to hurt your ride quality. It's going to hurt your comfort off-road. It's going to hurt your ability to go off-road, and it could potentially damage your vehicle. But also, you don't have to spend $1 million and buy the top of the line thing either. So that's kind of where I'm going, is middle of the road on suspension. I think that's a good fit. Next, bed racks. And as you can see, I have this bed rack up here, and it's my Extrusion Overland bed rack, and I love this bed rack. Don't get me wrong. Bed racks are great. But I've had multiple people post up in the comments and say, like, why'd you go with a bed rack? All your stuff gets dusty. All your stuff gets dirty. Everything gets rained on. It's exposed for people to take via theft, like my fridge back here. Hypothetically, if you kind of knew how that thing was set up, you could very easily undo the 4 straps that hold it. It is kind of stuck in between my bed and my roof rack, so it is a little bit difficult. But you could, if you wanted to, you could get that thing out of there and walk away with a $800 fridge. So ultimately, what I think my kind of ideal setup is after 5 years of doing this is an enclosed cap style rear end on the truck. And I'm going to give you some reasons for that. So my buddy over here in the Tacoma has an RSI Smart Cap, and it is amazing. It solves so many problems from the security standpoint, where you don't have to worry about people walking away with your stuff because it has lockable doors on it. to the fact that your gear stays out of the dust, it stays out of the weather, it stays out of the rain. It's like my fridge, which is in my bed right now, and my drawer system that I had to waterproof because it's in my bed. None of that would matter anymore if I had a cap and I actually sealed up my bed really well. So that's kind of where I've kind of gone after 5 years, is I finally figured out that I think my ideal setup, if I could start over again, spend $0 and not have spent all the money that I've spent on all the different things that I've had on my different trucks, I think cap is right for me. Either a regular cap with a rooftop tent on top, or a cap with a pass-through up into a rooftop tent might be even better. But something like that is probably ideal. I would save my money on a bed rack, and I would go with an enclosed cap like an RSI Smart Cap, or Extrusion actually has sort of an RSI Smart Cap competitor coming out soon with lockable panels on the side that open via gas struts, and it looks amazing too. So that's kind of my plan, is to run the Extrusion one. But again, I think enclosed cap is really the way to go, because it gives you so many options in bad weather, it gives you so many options to protect your gear, and it just prevents all the theft issues and dust and rain issues. All right, so final mod that I wouldn't do again is, I've learned a lot about, and granted, I bought some of my earlier vehicles for very little money, and so I didn't care about them quite as much. But drilling or cutting, I've drilled holes in my hood to mount a solar panel. I have cut fenders and things. I've put a jerry can mount on the back of my exterior, and I drilled holes through my hatch. They worked fine. I didn't have any leaks or any problems or anything like that. And to be fair, the vehicles weren't worth a ton on the resale value anyways. So like, I didn't have any tangible losses from it, but at the same time, I was very excited to mount a jerry can on my truck, or I was very excited to mount a solar panel on my truck. And I learned my lesson from that, right? Like, I don't plan to drill holes in this new truck or anything like that. Now, I did have to modify and cut a little bit of metal to fit the 33s. That's pretty standard if you're a Nissan person and you want to fit bigger tires. These things do not take well to bigger tires and wheels. But again, that's pretty minimal, and I could rust proof that and paint that stuff over in the wheel wells and not have much of a problem. But I'm definitely not drilling holes in my hood, or, you know, drilling holes in the hatch of my vehicle anymore. Nothing like that is worth the potential damage and or problems that will come with it down the road, when you could mount those things in a variety of ways. You can use, you know, I've seen some buddies of mine using C-sucker mounts on their vehicles, on their windows, on the rear window of their Xterra, to mount things like Rotopacks, or to mount their traction boards and things like that. There are other alternatives besides drilling holes in your sheet metal of your vehicle. And again, it sounds a little bit silly to say, but I mean, when I was younger and I was cheaper and I had an older vehicle that didn't cost me $1 million, I didn't care as much about that. But I will say, you might regret it down the road. So hopefully that is a learning point for you guys. But again, that will do it for this episode of All Things Overlanding. I hope that was helpful for you. If it was and you're on YouTube, click that like button down below. Consider subscribing and clicking the bell to be notified when new videos drop, because I do a couple every week, and I'd love to have you guys as subscribers. If you're on the podcast, add it to your favorites and leave a 5-star review. That helps a ton. It helps other people see it, and I'd appreciate it. Also, in the description down below is going to be a link to all my other social channels. So wherever you guys want to come hang out, I'd love to have you. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. There's also a link to my website where I've got funny overlanding camping themed patches and badges. So if you guys are into any of that stuff, definitely check those out. They're pretty funny, I think, and pretty cool. Dad joke type stuff. Don't burn your wiener and it's a hot dog, that kind of thing. So check that out. Also, below this video, if you're watching on YouTube, is a join button. That's relatively new, but it's just kind of a passive way to support the channel. Get you early access to the videos and stuff before they come out to everybody else, and gives you a few other perks. So if you want to check that out, check that out. Also, there's going to be a link to my Patreon page, which is more of an active way to sort of support the channel. We have a 24/7 Discord. We do a Zoom call once a month, and then we're going to do a couple trips every year. So if you want to come hang out and meet in person, that would be a good way to do it. And then last but not least, there's the Newbie Overlanders Facebook page. Totally free to join. Tons of awesome members. Different from the big groups, because you're not going to get bullied for asking a question. So if you're newer, or if you're just tired of the bullying in the big groups, definitely check that out as well. But again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.